Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, Londonderry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, we'll make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
Folks, welcome back to the latest episode of Gaelic Lives on Monday. The county season has been and gone. This day last week we were chatting Donegal and Kerry from Dublin. So now we're into the club season. It's amazing how quickly it turns around. It's a full weekend of Antrim Senior Championship, and thankfully I'm joined by Kieran McGourty, who knows plenty about that competition. He's walked that walk many times. Kieran, I was up in Belfast on Saturday night on a different mission, Fila and football. The place was absolutely bouncing to the Whistling Donkeys. So it seems to be an unbelievable festival, but you've got your football played as well.
Yeah, it sort of coincides at that time of year. There's great buzz about the road, especially, and as you say, there's more and more people coming in from further afield, and they're more than welcome. It's what Fila is about. But it's a fantastic festival, excuse me. Lots of people in and around, the west of the city especially, and we still have our love for Gaelic games, and as you say, it's come around very quickly. Just the county season was over last week, and we're straight into the business end of with the Antrim GA Gaelic Championship.
It just shows you, like, for example, Donegal's championship's on this weekend coming. So from their point of view, I think I was listening to a podcast with Roland Marr during the week. The Tip lads were back at it straight away. So it's a difficult one because people might think, well, surely you should get a wee bit of grace, but then the club players have their holidays and their family time planned around it. So there's not really much you can do. It's sort of just the way it is.
I still don't think we've got the perfect matchup, but then I don't really think there is sort of a perfect time. And, it should be a couple of weeks after when the county season ends. It's very difficult, to know when to start. Then a couple of, you have different formats of championships in different counties, and some of that's based on, well, the county boys are away, so she will have a group stage where they can integrate them back. It's not straight into a knockout, and suddenly you didn't have your county players all year. You come back a week later and they're put out of the championship. So it's still difficult to find, the perfect solution. But at the end of the day, whatever county, whatever teams, you just got to deal with it and move on.
And I suppose look at Group 3. I think that's what the group is, the group of death, as it's sort of been bandied about. I was talking with Joe Cassidy last week for a preview piece, and he was highlighting just the fact that a win was so important for Cregan because you could end up in a relegation battle before you know it. So I was at that game, 24 points to 114. It was fairly tight. Kieran, Brent McDonald got sent off just before half time, and from that, Jamie McCann kicked a 2-pointer to make it 11-9. So the way the game is now, the extra man is critical, and then Cregan were probably lucky not to get a red card after half time. There's a high tackle, and both were high tackles, but Patrick McCauley's was deemed yellow. So then that was sort of a major talking point at that point. And then shortly after that, Ballymena got a penalty. James McDonald dispatched it to the net, and they were sort of back in it. But then Cregan took over. Peter McGowan's got a black card, 37 minutes. So there's a 10-minute spell, Kieran, where they're playing with 13 men. And that was probably the spell. I think it might have been something like 4 points to 1 or 5 points to 1 during that spell. And like Cregan had played them in the league final, I think 9 days before that or something. So they had that under their belt. Joe did say they blooded 5 sort of lads during the league who were either minors or last year's minors. So they seem to have a wee bit of transition there. They have 3 groups of players within their squad. But from Ballymena's point of view, they were without Paddy McLear. He's awesome last year on their way to intermediate title, and the chat is he'd be back for the next round. So that was sort of where they were, and I suppose the 13 men never really recovered from it. But it was a decent game, I have to admit. Both keepers kicked very well, plenty of high fielding around the middle. But essentially, it was that spell that turned the game, and I suppose it'll leave a wee bit of regret with Ballymena, just the cards either side of half time, and they're going to have to pick themselves up very quickly, because as we touched on, this is that group, and like you at the other game, Lavjarg and your own St. Galls. So what did you sort of take of the Creggan one, first of all, before you get into the game that you're actually at? Were you sort of...
Well, I mean, Creggan to me are under a wee bit of pressure because they won the championship, a number of years ago, and they haven't really kicked on. And I know they've struggled with injuries, and it's very quickly that you can lose your form and confidence. So I know Joe's in there, probably no better man, but Creggan under a wee bit of pressure. That game at Ballymena would have been a difficult game for them. And as you say, for long parts of the game, it seemed to be tight enough, and the cards seemed to make the difference. And listen, you take any break, you're going to get in the championship. So it's a good win for Creggan. On the flip side, Ballymena have shown that they're able to compete with the best of teams, and they're going to have to lick their wounds. I think they go to Milltown next. St. Galls are probably going to be talked up a wee bit, but they're coming in as favourites possibly against Ballymena, which it's going to be a really difficult game. And people who are looking from the outset will probably see Creggan winning comfortably, probably on the scoreboard, and think St. Galls beat Lavjarg. They should be firm favourites, but I think it'll be a very tight game.
Like Creggan, I noticed the rung on Liam Quinn. I remember him playing county underage, and he kicked a couple of points in the middle of the half as well, and they seem to just get to... It's the same old story with kickouts with the 13 players. They were trying to hem Ballymena in. But at the same time, like, Baker's been in there, I think, I'm not sure, 4 or 5 years, and they went from an intermediate side to up round the top of the senior league a couple of years in a row, and obviously got to the final and beat Cargan on penalties, which is no mean feat either. So it's a case of just getting back on the horse. It's as simple as that, because they have to.
If you look at, they make the point there. If you look at Ballymena, and they'll be disappointed with the result of their day, but when you look at the big picture where they've come in the last number of years, there's clear progress. And it's a group of death. They're probably thinking we could have got a better group and maybe have a chance to get to the quarter final of a senior championship, which will be the next natural progression for them. But the fact that they're there competing, they're at the top end of the league. If you offered that to Ballymena a few years ago, they obviously would have taken it. Now, you just don't want to rest on their laurels, you want to kick on, but they've shown that they can compete, and they're still in this competition, because I think this group will take another few twists and turns before it's finished. So they're definitely not out of it. But either way, it's been a good couple of years for Ballymena, and they're starting to be a recognised senior football team. And
you're up in Hamilton yourself yesterday, and
yeah, it was a straight. There was a strong wind blowing, and St. Galls played in the first half. They were 1-10 to 2 points up. Played very good football. Kevin Niblock came up from nets and kicked two pointers. And as you say, you spoke about the action man. If not a lot of teams I've seen are using the keeper's action man, but with the wind, it made sense for Niblock to come up. And I don't know, maybe people haven't seen him for a while, and he still has the kicking in his locker, and he kicked two pointers. And then the second half, Lavjarg started really well, but missed a couple of simple enough scores, and you felt the game was over. Then they got back into the game, a couple of 2 pointers, but every time they sort of got close, a wee bit like Donegal and Kerry last week, every time they got just that wee bit close, some goals went up, and they actually scored goals. When I look back, I think someone says they only scored 1 point in the second half. So when you break it down, some goals were deserving winners. They got the scores when they needed, but Lavjarg will still feel that they maybe left it behind, even though there was quite a, what was it, 11 points in at half time. They still could have come back and won the game.
And where does St. Galls sit? Like last year, they, correct me if I'm wrong here, they ended up in a group of death, didn't make the quarterfinals, relegation didn't, but they won that game handy, I think.
Yeah.
If I'm right here. So what's sort of their progression been from last year in terms of personnel? Or, well, Chris Keir's injured, and now Kevin Niblock swapped the Derry Loughlin manager a bit for the number 1 jersey. So is there much other change?
Yeah, there's just a lot of young players. You look around, St. Galls are probably about 25 senior footballers. Now, they don't have the stars maybe of past, but they have a lot of solid players, and they're a young team. We're quite small, so we have a good level of fitness. But we were in the group of death last year, and I spoke to Sean Kelly and Tyrone Neal after, and they were very disappointed we didn't get out. And I was thinking, it's difficult. We're a young team, we're in transition, but being the winners that they are, they're very disappointed. So this is a good start from, and it'd be a good start. It'd be a good progress to get to the quarter final of the championship. But there's work to do, as I said. It'll not be easy the next day out against Ballymena.
And Kevin Liblock was Derry Loughlin's manager that day in the penalty shootout down in Cargan, and now he's in the opposite corner. So another wee aside going into it. Group 1, Cargan were 117 to 14 point winners over their neighbours out in Whitehill, and I think John Carn got a goal in the first half, which was the difference. But from what I'm hearing, it was a pretty tight game, and Connor Johnson, Mick McCann might have put together a wee run of scores to break the, sort of to pull away. But I think Dara Fagan had kicked a few 2-pointers for Tiernan as well. So what's your reading into that result? And I suppose Cargan have been, as well said, Kieran, they've been top dogs for quite a while.
Yeah, and they have that maybe luxury of, peaking at the right time. But it's like anything, you go out as favourites. Randallstown obviously set their stall out, to make it tight, to stay in the game, and that there, and as you said, there was a bit of a flurry between Michael McCann and Connor Johnson that obviously given that wee bit of breathing space. But I think Cargill will be happy enough. They have a good group. Obviously, they'll not be saying that, and they'll take every game as comes. But I think, they'll be just waiting to get to the quarter final, and they'll be really just building towards that and a strong back end of the season.
And from your own point of view, Kieran, you played in a team that's probably doing what Cargan are doing right now, that dominance of, and whenever you were playing, you probably didn't have group stages. So how do you sort of manage because at the end of the day, no matter what happens, you just have to keep winning. And that's the only currency, and they have to do that as well.
Yeah, as I said at the start, there's different formats of competitions. Cargan will know the group they have. They've seen it from, a few months ago. They're probably sitting down thinking, we'll start to build towards the tail end of June, the start of the summer. And that's fine. People often get a wee bit critical about that. Cargan need to do what they need, what's best for them. And, they take some league games serious enough, or, and they give different players or rest players. So it'll all be peaking towards us end. And as you said, whatever the competition, you got to win. But at this stage, it's probably just about getting over the line and just getting to the quarter final. And the business end will start then. And again, they've got a good group. They'll not be saying that there. But if that's the group they were dealt, so be it. They can use that to their advantage. Whereas St. Gauls and Laviar and Cragan and Ballymena, it's a tough group. You got to be ready from the first game, and because the consequences if you don't win that first game.
And the other game in that group was Dunloy 230, St. John's 111. Brendan McTaggart from the Saffron Gale was saying, I think Dunloy maybe had 9 2-pointers over the game. He was reporting on it, so that's pretty significant. Keelan Malloy, we saw big ball, small ball. He got 1-7. Tom McFerrin got 7 points, and by all accounts, he seemed to ramp it up even in the second half. But what do you read into the scoreline? You said before recording the Johnnies are missing a couple of key men, but at the same time, it's still a significant result for Dunloy.
It's significant, and as you said, when you see that scoreline, the first thing you're thinking is how many 2-pointers did Dunloy score? And when you think back to their run to the final a couple of years ago, if there had been a 2-point arc then, not that we'll never know, but they were kicking long range points. You had the boy Keelan Malloy and you had Sean Elliott and then different boys that were able to kick scores. And I mean, we hadn't seen a lot of Dunloy then, and these herders that enjoy playing football were coming along with such a array of skills, but they were able to kick 2 long range shots. And when I seen that scoreline, yes, you were going, there must have been a lot of 2-pointers, but it wasn't surprising. Now maybe there was a wind and like there was up in Hamerstown, where that 2-point arc, it was you could definitely score, but it doesn't surprise me. And again, if St. John's are missing sort of key players, you would fancy Dunloy to win. But it's a wee bit of a statement. If there's 9 2-pointers, it sends a signal out that these boys can score, and the new rules are going to suit them.
That sort of leaves St. John's where they're in a difficult situation now to qualify, because they've Cargan in that group as well, and they're sort of backed into a corner now. But as you say, like Paddy McBride, we saw in the Antrim jersey the value of 2-pointers. So is it a case of getting as many of your key men back on the stage as you can?
I think so. And St. John's are going through rebuilding as well, and that's not other clubs' issue. But you have to realise where teams are at, and people are often critical of, especially within our own clubs, it's easy to do, where we're at, the progress. St. John's, I think, are going to struggle for a few years, and it's important to just sort of try and build a new team. But whoever they get next, like if it's do or die, like you can't see Corgan should top the group, and unless St. John's win 2 matches, one of them would have to be against St. John's or against Corgan. I think they're right.
Group 3, Rossa 3-14, Aldergrove 1-6. Mick Byrne just keeps doing it. He got 1-3. I've often said it on this podcast before. An excellent goalkeeper. If he was playing in Division 1, he'd be getting rave reviews every week. So I think they got their 3 goals in the first half, and I think it was in Aldergrove as well. So they've started with a bang. And is it Jared Walsh who scored the goal? Is that Jared Walsh from Antrim hurling fame as well? So their county men have delivered, and Don McInhill may have got a handful of points. So big start for Rossa.
I'm taking a bit of credit for Mick Byrne because I taught him in school, and we weren't that good up the pitch, and he was in that, so we always encouraged him to come up and play out the field a wee bit and be that action man. So hope it doesn't come back to bite St. Gall somewhere along the way. But he's such a fantastic goalkeeper, and as you say, Jared Walsh back, who's a fantastic footballer. I think last year actually, or maybe earlier in the year, they asked him on the senior football panel. Obviously, it's very difficult to be a dual club player, never made dual county, but he's a fantastic footballer. And Rossa wouldn't have had some of them players earlier in the season, and they struggled. And whereas Aldergrove were going well, so it surprised me. I thought it would have been a lot closer. I probably expected Rossa to win, but I thought that could have been a potential banana skin. But it's a good win for Rossa.
And then from like they won the hurling league, didn't they?
They did, yeah.
So that's significant. You're chatting about Denoy balancing the books and Slantnail and Coola and all these dual clubs. So it's a very real situation where they're probably going to do the week on week thing, the dual players now, which is the balance.
Yeah, it's extremely difficult, but there are examples where it does work. And to say that it's a good win for us, Belfast hurling is not in a great place at the minute, and Rossa and St. John's are actually, at the top end of the Antrim hurling, and it's good that one won the league. And there's obviously we need more hurling clubs in Belfast to sort of to lift the level, but balancing it can be very difficult, and it's even more so because it's at the championship. Whereas earlier, if you're playing league matches, you don't mind maybe someone missing the league match. These boys are back in. You want to be totally focused on the championship, but 1 week they're football, and the next week it's hurling. So it's really difficult for management and for players. So as a dual player, it's great to see dual clubs and dual players.
And Portland were in the final last year. They rattled up 5-22 against Dunravel, and they were at home. I think they might have got 2 early goals. Dermot McAleese was one of them who signed off from the county scene and straight into county action. They lost last year's final, and they lost a couple of finals to yourselves way back in the day whenever John McKeever would have been playing. So what's the sort of, they would have been expected to win that one, but where do they sort of sit in the pecking order with Carrigan, I suppose, or have been the long time champions?
Yeah, I've said it for years. Portland can beat anyone on their day. It's can they back it up and produce 2 when they get to the quarterfinal? Can they win 3 big games? Now, I definitely think they're a better team. They're starting to show a bit more consistency. I think they'll be happy enough for the group they got, a wee bit like Corgan, that they'll be happy with the group, that they can sort of get another win and focus for the quarterfinal. I said it last year. I'll just say it, I think they blew their chance to win the championship. Will they have that resilience to come back? Hopefully, from their point of view. I thought that the chances to take Corgan had a really bad day, but still get over the line. So it's sort of, will that make or break Portland? They lost finals, but none of them players really are in this team. There may be a small number, but now's the time they really got to step up and say, right, we're genuine contenders. We were there last year. We'll let it go a wee bit, but we're back, and that brings its own pressure. So we'll see in the next couple of weeks whether Portland can back it up. And I don't mean that in any derogatory way. It's they got to get over the line, and it was a great chance last year. It'll be a hard one to take. It's been a long year, but they're back now, so it'll be interesting to see if they can kick on.
Probably leaves the race a wee bit more exciting because you've lots of people with their hands up, like the Noy were obviously in the final themselves, and it's like every championship, the knockouts whenever it gets real. So I suppose it's that everybody's after Cargan's crown, but if there's more teams, it obviously makes it. It's a wee bit like the All Ireland series this year, where it makes it that wee bit more exciting. Just that there's more to talk about. More teams feel the chance.
Yeah, and then people will think Corgan were maybe excuse me on the way down a wee bit. They're still a wee bit reliant on their elder statesmen who are still producing. To their credit, but people will be looking at saying that are Corgan just as strong as they were a few years ago? They've had disappointing results in Ulster. Is this towards the end? Can we maybe just catch them and put an end to it? I don't know if that's going to be the case. I still think Corgan are firm favourites, but other people will be looking at that. You Portland own who should be there, Dunloy, St Galls, if they can get through, are a decent team. But then I still think there's going to be more drama in that group. Lav Yarg might have another kick in them. So it'll be interesting to see. It's there's going to be a couple of good teams that aren't going to get to the quarters, but ultimately the quarter final there should be some very good matches.
And in the final group, Group 4, St Bridget's were convincing runners over St Paul's. They got 5 goals and have been knocking around the top of it as well. Won the league, was it last year as well? So they would have been expected to come through that one. Didn't St Paul's just get promoted with them this past couple of years back up again? So an expected enough result.
Yeah, I should have mentioned St Bridget's and that, or St Bridget's and that. Some people have me in a bit of bother for saying that we could beat Corgan by 10 points last year. So the daggers are still in my back there. So, but they're on the way up. They're genuine contenders. They've got obviously a couple of boys who've been in for a few years from Derry, and it's added to them. And they're another team that are confident enough that they can go a long way. Again, they got a good group. St Paul's, Donna Finnegan, long-serving stalwart St Paul's. He was their manager. I was talking to him earlier in the year. They're just looking to get safe in the league, and they've had a good league campaign. They had a few difficult results, but they showed a lot of resilience. So I think St Paul's will be happy enough what they've got out of this year. It's difficult, St Bridget's are up maybe in the top 2-3 teams in the county. So that was a fairly convincing win as expected. But I think is it Ackagallon and the Hull played with the other teams in that group?
It is, yeah. And
the game we had Ackagallon, there was another team that should be in the top 3-4 that should have been kicking on from their county final appearance, and there's something just not right up in Ackagallon. It's very poor throughout the league. They've obviously talented players, and Hull are never easy to beat, but that's still a pretty big surprise.
Yes, I was going to say last but by no means least, because it was a big result because it was away from home, and I'm not sure it was. I don't want to say in case you get it wrong, but Ackagallon, I think they lost a man 2 bookings about midway through the second half, and Hull might have been 2 points down at the time. I think Jimmy O'Connell was their main scorer. Adam Loughlin got a goal in the first half, but then straight back, Colin McDonald got a goal for Hull. So I think they were 1-up at half time, but it's a wee bit like I suppose the Ballymena and Craigan game where the extra man, it used to not be as big. It used to really be an advantage to have a man down sometimes in the old game because people lifted their game, but that seemed to be a factor here, Kieran. So, and you're chatting about dual clubs like Hull. I remember talking to Harry Graham, long-standing ref, and all. He used to say to me that nobody was ever allowed to retire because they just didn't have the numbers. But they always seem to be really difficult to beat, and some level of consistency from a small club on both codes. They've been to Croke Park in Ireland and all these things. So the result of the weekend or not?
So sorry, you cut it there.
Was that the result of the weekend for you, do you feel, or was the Hull sort of, it wasn't as big a shock as other people may have saw it?
It still probably is the result of the weekend, but it's not as big a shock. Even Ackagallon, they haven't been playing well this year. Their league form has been so erratic, and you would still expect them to win just based on the quality of player. But as you say, you can't have nothing but admiration for a Hull. They've been dual club. There's so many players playing for, as you say, I don't think any of them ever retire. And there will be teams who win championships and go on, but some of the victories over the year and the resilience of a Hull, it deserves massive credit.
And then I suppose because maybe some of our listeners don't understand the way it works, it is the 2 teams from each group go through to the quarterfinals, and is it first versus second the way it works in the seeding, and then the other 2 are into the relegation zone. So some teams are already looking over their shoulders. I'm not saying it's too early, but it's still a concern. You go into the next game and you need a win, or you could be in relegation battle. That's the harsh reality of it over the next few weeks.
And ultimately, there'll only be one relegated. But when you're out of the championship, you don't want to be playing any more games. You've set out your stall to be playing in the business end and the knockout stages in September. So even though you're not likely, because there'll only be one team relegated from the championship, it's just having to play games, having to go out another Saturday or Sunday when your season's basically over, and it's hard to get up for it, and then you can end up in difficulties because people might go to, say, in Belfast to soccer, or people might be able to get off work because their attitude is, listen, our season's over, and you could end up in a really difficult position. But it's just, you don't want to be playing relegation. When you're in a championship, generally that's when everyone feels their season's over, and you don't want to be facing another match. But there are going to be some big names in that relegation battle.
So with 16 teams over the next couple of weeks, Kieran, are going to be trying to see, can they get back-to-back wins. Some other teams trying to get back on the horse. Thanks a million for your time jumping on this morning. And folks, you can check back on Thursday. We will have another podcast. We're sort of completely into club season now, and every Monday we'll be back on here taking a look at the Ulster clubs championships all through the province. And it started off with Antrim, and we'll be back again next Monday. Kieran, thanks a million for your time, and thanks for all our listeners for tuning in.
Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, London Derry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, we'll make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.